you for the click. My name is Luxeley, and if you can't see me, well, that's because I'm stealth. We're going to talk about subtlety rogues, where they stand here and now on the beta, sort of a first impressions type of video. This isn't necessarily a guide. I just want to give an overall view where sub-rogues stand right here, right now, from a PvE and a PvP perspective, and I'm going to break things down and grade them on 6 different categories. The first category is single target damage, second category, AOE damage, third category, crowd control, fourth category, survivability, fifth category, mobility, and last but not least, we're going to talk about utility. Now, when I talk about utility, I'm not talking about the overall value that you bring to a group as far as DPS or AOE might be concerned. It's essentially, what is it that's going to make a group, whether you're spamming dungeons or spamming battlegrounds or spamming arena. Bottom line is, what is it that's going to make a group say, we have to get ourselves a rogue? That's what I mean by utility. Now, when I grade all these 3 categories, I'm heavily weighing in 2 factors. The first factor is, how does each particular category for a sub-rogue compare in Legion with BFA? And 2, how does it compare, each particular category, how does it compare with other DPS classes? My grading system is very much how I would probably grade any given movie. It's on a scale of 1 through 5. 1 meaning that somewhere along the line, we could most definitely expect some kind of a buff, whether it's at launch, a few months into the X-Pack. 5 meaning that somewhere along the line, we can most definitely expect some kind of nerf. Before I get into this, I want to talk a little bit about how I feel about sub-rogues, because this has been kind of a love-hate thing for me, in the sense that I really do love the class. I always have since day one. Problem is, when it comes to DPS, I'm not particularly great at a sub-rogue, or any kind of rogue for that matter, but when it comes to CC, yes, I am. I think I am pretty good. And I am starting to really find a groove with rogue, and it very well might be something I'm maining. So let me get into why. Here we go. Single target damage. The overwhelming majority, pretty much all of your single target abilities, both combo point generators and finishers, return, copy, and paste from Legion to BFA. Your mastery also remains the same. Your mastery being Executioner increases the damage of your finishers. This, of course, scales as your mastery goes up. Your only finisher that changes is NIGHTBLADE. This is the one and only change to your combo generators and finishers, NIGHTBLADE. Here's the deal. In Legion, NIGHTBLADE basically reduced the target's movement speed by 50% and gave you an extra 15% damage to enemies inflicted with NIGHTBLADE. So essentially it was a dot and speed reduction. In BFA, there is no longer a speed reduction. Instead, there's reduced healing by 15% and the 15% damage increase to targets inflicted with NIGHTBLADE also returns. Time to lick my fingers, turn the page, talk about the talents. 2 new talents worth mentioning: Find Weakness, Shadow Strike, and Cheap Shot give you a 10-second window where you could bypass 40% of the target's armor. This is huge in PvP, obviously against plate. The second new talent, Shot in the Dark, after entering Stealth or Shadow Step, your next Cheap Shot is 100% free. Great energy management right there. Both of these new talents certainly great for PvP, kind of a non-event for PvE. As far as talents that have been pruned or that are just flat out gone with reference to single target damage, Anticipation is no longer around. Anticipation used to let you accumulate up to 10 combo points. No longer there. Pruned, history deleted. 3 talents have changed. Let's go over the changes. Weapon Master, Shadow Strike, and Backstab, which can have a percentage chance to hit a target twice. In Legion, that percentage chance was 6%. In BFA, it goes up to 15%. Huge leap there. Shadow Focus, Stealth, and Shadow Dance. In Legion, there was a 75% reduction on the cost of those 2 abilities. In BFA, 25% reduction of the resources to use those 2 abilities. That's obviously a nerf. Dark Shadow. While Shadow Dance is active, all damage in Legion, it was 30%, would be the damage buff that you would receive. In BFA, 25%. 5% difference, not a big deal, but you know me, I want to be thorough. I'm going to get into the artifact, as you guys probably already know by now. All artifact traits are gone. Some on-use abilities found a home in the talent section of certain specs. Some of them are just flat out gone. In this case, when it comes to sub-rogues, Gormore's Bite is unfortunately gone. This was a great, great ability, at least in my opinion. What diminished it was that you could only use it once every minute, but here's the deal with what it did. First of all, it hit with shadow damage, which is huge in PvP, especially against plate. It gimped the target's movement speed by 60%, or gimped means snared, and it also granted 30 energy over 6 seconds. Oh, and by the way, gave you 3 combo points. Hit hard too. Great ability. Unfortunately, it's gone. Now, a few traits that are gone as well. One big trait that we're losing here is Feeding Frenzy. Gormore's Bite causes the next 3 finishers to cost 0 energy. Huge loss to energy management here. It does make up in other areas, though, in BFA, but it's a big loss. Another ability or trait that's missing is gone. History Finito. Finality. After using NIGHTBLADE or Eviscerate, your next finishing move is empowered by Fangs of the Devourer. It's the name of your artifact. A little extra damage there. Gone. Energetic Stabbing. Another artifact trait that's gone. Backstab, Shadow Strike, and Cheap Shot have a 50% chance to refund energy. So if you see a trend going on here, it's kind of like hitting the energy management, and you would think that it would have a huge impact on single target damage or overall DPS, but the reality is it doesn't. Because from my experience playing in the beta, stripped down, no enchants, no gems, basic gear, no Azeroth armor, no fancy trinkets, bottom line, just bare bones stuff. It's pretty darn good, the single target damage. I had a lot of fun with this. And you do have a good mix of both shadow damage and also regular physical damage, which is great in PvP. I think Find Weakness is a tremendous, tremendous boost in PvP. Overall, I gotta give your single target damage a solid 4 here. AOE damage. Before I get into AOE damage, I want to talk about a few of the passes, or actually all of the passes that are coming back in BFA, including Fleet-Footed, Deepening Shadows, Shadowy Techniques, and of course, Relentless Strikes. Now, Shuriken Combo, Shuriken Storm increases the damage of your next Eviscerate by 8% for each enemy hit beyond the first, stacks up to 5 times. So essentially, initially it was 5% in the BFA beta. Now they bumped it up to 8%, but in Legion it was 10%. Nonetheless, it's going to help your AoE damage. That little thing that you had going on with Shadow Dance, where you would basically get a little bit of a boost on your Shuriken Storm, the reality is that comes back as well. Sub-rogues are certainly not noted for their AoE. It's traditionally been kind of weak, continues to be weak, but then again, it's expected. But as far as how it compares to other classes in the BFA beta, it's terrible. As far as how it compares to how things were in Legion, it's about the same. Let's talk about a few talents that are going to affect AoE that I think are rather significant. For example, Night Terrors. Shuriken Storm will reduce the movement speed of the target by 30% for 8 seconds. Not that huge. Also, Shuriken Tornado. Release a Shuriken Storm every 1 second for up to 4 seconds. The reality is, it's a nice boost to your AoE there, so it makes it a little bit better maybe than it was in Legion. And of course, Secret Technique. Now this ability is a hell of a lot of fun. Just because of this one ability alone, just the animation of it, really gets me excited about Sub-Rogues. It's a finishing move that essentially creates shadowy clones that attack the target for physical damage and reduce damage to other targets. So it's kind of a single target ability as well, but I threw it in the AoE section because this section is a little shorter than the single target section was. And the reality is, I love this ability. It's got the animation of Shadow Strike essentially, but it's more definitive and pronounced, and there's about 2 other visuals that kick in. And it just really, really helps the class fantasy. Incredible animation, and it does a significant amount of damage when you use it at the right time. I love the ability, and it really, really makes me interested in Sub-Rogues, but that's me. I'm a big guy who likes animations and mobility in a class. We all know Sub-Rogues have mobility, and with this particular animation, it gets me excited. So overall, as far as AoE damage is concerned, I give it about a 2.5. It's a little bit better than it was in Legion, but there's a long list of other specs that do better when it comes to AoE damage. Crowd control. Mages, rogues, always known for crowd control, and that will continue. That trend will continue. There's a reason why the trio of Rogue, Mage, Priest has arguably been among the top 3 comps in 3's Arena since the dawn of World of Warcraft, since the beginning of Arena. Both Classes, both specializations, say Sub-Rogue and Frost Mage, for example, great single target damage, great CC, and a combination of the two is just lethal. Just absolutely lethal, and you throw in a priest, even more lethal. The reality is that's going to continue. Now, we can make an argument that the Rogue CC might have kind of high cooldowns as far as blind is concerned with a 2-minute cooldown, but the idea that you're coming out of stealth, you could always use sap to take a target out of the equation, and you have access to cheap shot regularly as a result of your shadow dances. You have 2 charges of that, so you can access cheap shot to get a quick stun in. If you don't have the combo points, obviously kidney shot, great stun there. Like every other melee, you have your interrupt and your kick, and you have great mobility with Shadow Step, with also 2 charges to get within range to get a quick interrupt off. Overall, CC's always been good. I would like to see some kind of disarm back into PvP talents for rogues, just to make them a little bit stronger when they go up against plate. I think that would be a great addition. I don't think it's adding too much in there. Other than that, CC is really good. I want to just talk about one particular talent that's gone. It is Strike from the Shadows. Now, I don't know how significant this is, considering the fact that you have access to cheap shot and access to kidney shot to get that stun. But if you took Strike from the Shadows, what it would do, Shadow Strike would stun the target in PvE and essentially daze the target in PvP. It was enough to keep them within range so you could do more damage and kind of slow their momentum up, and it's kind of a significant loss here. That's why I would like to see a dismantle in the repertoire. But overall, you can't knock rogues for their CC, and the fact that they're coming at you from stealth makes their CC even that much more strong. And even the idea of having stealth, or having something like Vanish with the PvP talent that can lower the cooldown, I believe, by 45 seconds still, you can evade quite a bit of CC. You see someone casting a polymorph at you from a distance, and you don't have the means to interrupt. In other words, maybe you just don't have a Shadow Step available. You can just vanish and avoid it. So avoidance of CC adds to your overall capabilities here. That's why I have to give rogues a solid 4 when it comes to their CC. The one thing that I really want to see is some kind of disarm. I really think that's necessary. Otherwise, a solid 4. Survivability. This isn't an area that sub-rogues have long been favorable in, but it's been improving over the years, and I think that trend has stopped. Things are pretty much the same as they were in Legion as far as your survivability is concerned. Yes, you have Crimson Vial coming back on a 30-second cooldown, which is really great. You also have evasion, so you could avoid some physical damage, and of course you have good old Cloak of Shadows against magical damage, poisons, certainly enough to keep you in the fight, as well as cheap death and even elusiveness. Overall, your survivability is kind of average. There are quite a few classes that have better survivability than the Sub-Rogue, but you have to throw Stealth and Vanish into this equation, just simply because you can get yourself out of a tough situation with a quick Vanish. That adds to your survivability. It truly does. You also have to throw your stuns into the mix as an intangible that are going to enhance your survivability if you use them right. Cheap Shot, something you have access to with Shadow Dance as well as Vanish, or anytime you're in Stealth, and of course Kidney Shot, as long as the combo points are there. Quick Kidney Shot, get out of dodge. Use your speed boost, get out of dodge, Vanish, get yourself out of trouble. Huge benefits to the rogue. Now, the entire tier 60 is about survivability, nothing new here. Soothing Darkness, which gives you a heal over time when you're stealth. Kind of cool. Cheat Death, frustrating for everybody else in PvP, really cool for the rogue in PvP. When it comes to PvE, it's enough to keep you in the fight. And a good healer will also help keep you in the fight when they know Cheat Death kicks in. And of course, elusiveness, which obviously you're going to be sacrificing some energy in order to use this when you use Feint, but it's another way that you can help mitigate damage. And that's what the entire tier 60 is about. I don't think there's a bad choice here. It all matters on what your playstyle is, what your weaknesses are, what it is that you want to strengthen up. Now, as far as your artifact is concerned, 3 traits are gone, and it hurts a bit. It really does. First and foremost, Embrace Darkness. When you enter Stealth or Shadow Dance, you gain an Absorption Shield. This is huge to help mitigate some poisons and dot damage, and a little bit extra bonus when you hit Shadow Dance to get that shield. It's going to help you keep you in the fight and maybe mitigate some of the damage. So that's gone. That was kind of huge. Two other abilities, Ghost Armor, which gave you an extra 13% dodge, in some cases more, depending on what kind of relics you had and how you had it stacked. And also Cat-like Reflexes, which gave you 25% dodge and 100% immunity to fall damage, which is just kind of fun. If you think about it, the loss of these two abilities is almost a 40% reduction in your overall dodge. That's kind of huge, and it's going to show in PvP. It's even going to show in PvE against melee-type bosses. Overall here, I think your survivability could use a little bit of a boost, quite honestly. I would give it a solid 2. I think it could be bolstered up quite a bit. Now, there is a skill level, depending on when you use Vanish, depending on when you use Shadow Dance, or Cheap Shot, or Kidney Shot, that can certainly help with your survivability. But overall here, for the average rogue, guy like me, I gotta give it a 2. Mobility. Keep in mind, as I said earlier, NIGHTBLADE no longer snares the target by 50%, which means the talent, Tangled Shadow, is deleted, gone, no longer there. Tangled Shadow increased the snare of the target when NIGHTBLADE is active by 20%, an additional 20% for a total of 70%. Now, you do have some snares that are 30% snares out there, but that's not going to keep the target in range in PvP. And you don't want to be burning Shadow Steps in order to maintain uptime. You want to be able to keep up with the target, and the best way to do that is by snaring them. Now, you can still snare them with the PvP talent Shiv, which you're going to be now forced to take as one of your 3 talents in order to have that solid 70% snare to keep the target in range when you do catch up the target. Obviously, keeping the target within melee range is going to help you have uptime. So you don't want to burn unnecessary sprints, which of course is your baseline ability to returns, and you don't want to burn unnecessary Shadow Steps, which you have 2 charges of on a decent cooldown. Your mobility as a rogue, you might think, is pretty good, and you would be right. But over the last couple of years, rogues' mobility have been knocked down a few pegs. Not because, as a class, their mobility has been gimped or pruned or anything to that effect, but more so because of the addition of monks in Mist of Pandaria, and certainly because of the addition of demon hunters in Legion. This knocks rogues down a couple of pegs as far as mobility is concerned, but their mobility is still pretty darn good, and they can maintain quite a bit of upside. If you add stealth into the mix with an ability like Night Stalker, where you can get a little bit of speed boost when you're stealth, it's pretty strong. It really is, and stealth has a way of kind of, in an intangible way, increasing your overall mobility. I have to give rogue mobility a solid 4 here. Like I said, the perception is it's not as good as it used to be, but that's because of the addition of monks and demon hunters. Really, solid 4. Utility. Over the years, rogue utility has been inching its way up and up and up the charts, almost completely unnoticed. More so unnoticed in PvE than in PvP. There are some very interesting abilities that we're going to get into that really give rogues quite a bit of utility in PvP. Shroud of Concealment, for example, is something that was taken away in Legion, and Blizzard decided to bring it back. Put it on a 6-minute cooldown, gives everybody stealth within 20 yards for a certain amount of time. 6-minute cooldown's kind of long, let's be real, but it certainly adds quite a bit of utility to any PvP or PvE group. Not 100% sure if it's still unusable in rated PvP, but nonetheless, just for fun, in BG's absolutely still in your bat utility belt. Tricks of the Trade, great for PvP and PvE. But hold the phone, not as good as it used to be in PvP, because the PvP talent Thieves' Gambit is gone, which gave Tricks of the Trade the ability to extend to friendly targets within 20 yards, where they could gain a Cloak of Shadows, a Crimson Veil, Eviscerate, Vanish with reduced benefits. The fact that this is no longer part of your repertoire as far as PvP talents go is a huge knock to your overall utility. But Tricks of Trade will still offer quite a bit of utility in raids in M+. Your utility is also extended quite a bit with something like Smoke Bomb. There's nothing like it in the game. It is a great ability as far as PvP goes. It's almost a must taking that talent, especially when you're doing rated battlegrounds or regular battlegrounds or even in arena. You want to isolate the healer, that means that you can't be CC'd by the other players. You want to isolate the target, that means you can't be healed by the healer. Either way you use it, it has a tremendous amount of utility in PvP. So this is kind of an interesting mix here because you lose Thieves' Gambit, which is huge. You do bring back Smoke Bomb, you do bring back your Shrouded Concealment, and the fact that you could go stealth and CC people from stealth is also pretty huge and kind of an intangible utility. I gotta give Rogue utility a solid 3 here. It's largely the same except for Thieves' Gambit, which is a huge loss. If we had Thieves' Gambit still, I would say it would be a good 4. I think that we need a little bit more utility in the PvP talents, but there's quite an assortment of things that you could choose from that are going to increase your utility. Honor Among Thieves, generating combo points. You also have Shadowy Duel. You have Thieves' Bargain. You have Phantom Assassin. And speaking of that last particular tier, one of the things that I've noticed is that if you were a class in Legion where you kind of looked at that last tier and you thought, wow, I wish I had 2 of these 3 abilities or all 3 of these abilities, Rogues are one of those classes. And the fact that you can now have all 3 of those abilities is pretty huge when it comes to PvP. That Thieves' Gambit really bothers me that it's gone. And I would love to give it a higher rating, but I got to give it an average overall 3. One thing I also neglected to mention, I want to mention it right now. Actually, 2 things. One, there's a new passive called Shadow's Grasp, which essentially Backstab and Shadow Strike give the target a 30% snare for 8 seconds. 30% snare certainly isn't going to get the job done when it comes to uptime in PvP, but it will get the job done in PvE. You're still going to have to take Shiv. And the other thing I neglected to mention, Death from Above. Very fun ability. It used to be a regular talent. It is now a PvP talent. But the fact that you have what I call an absolutely fun and amazing talent, secret technique, you're probably going to go with that instead of good old Death from Above. This is Luxeley saying, whatever it is, by you, whether it's morning, afternoon, or night, make it epic.